Good morning everyone, and a very warm welcome to another episode of Azure Dan, the Cloud and Proud Sessions. So let's think about what we did last week. Now last week we were interested in building our core infrastructure. And what I mean by that is we wanted to go ahead and build our virtual networks. So we started off by building our production VNet. We then went ahead and built a development VNet. And from there we built multiple gateways and configured pre-shared key site-to-site connectivity so that production would be able to speak to development and development would be able to speak to production. Finally, we created a point-to-site VPN that allowed external clients access into our production network using certificate authentication. So what are we going to do this week? Well, this week we're going to build on top of that topology. We're going to discuss and implement IaaS Virtual Machines, investigate connectivity and addressing options, and gain a deeper understanding of VIPs, PIPs, and IPs. Now to achieve this, we're going to deploy a domain environment. From there, we'll add member servers and take advantage of availability sets and auto scaling. By the end of our session, we want to be able to manage IaaS cloud services and endpoints, identify suitable workloads for our virtual machines, understand the various IP addressing options, configure high availability and scalability, and finally understand VM security. Now our session outcome will, like I said, build on top of last week, so we've got our existing infrastructure. Oh, I've just noticed there's a typo there. That should be on a 20. Let's just quickly change that. So let's put that onto a pen. So that shouldn't be 30, they should be 20s. And that's fine. Okay, so by the end of our session, we would have built on what we did last week, but we're going to have a single VM with no high availability, which is going to be our domain controller. From there, we're going to build a couple of member servers, and we're going to build those with high availability and take advantage of auto scaling to save money. All of these virtual machines will need to be placed into a blob storage container. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so hopefully your Azure dashboard is looking similar to mine. Now again, this is what we created last week. We created our production VNet, we created our development VNet, and we connected the two together. And again, on production we've got our client machine, which is now VPN'd into production. So we're going to start off by building our domain controller. Okay, but before we do that, we want to take advantage of setting up our DNS options. Okay, so because I'm going to build a new virtual machine, and that's going to be the domain controller for all other virtual machines that I create in my cloud, then what I want to do is I want those virtual machines to get the correct IP address of the DNS server as they're built. So on both VNets, I'm going to come down to my DNS server, and I'm going to add a new IP address. Now the IP address is going to be 192.168.10.10, and this is going to be the IP address of the virtual machine that we create, which hosts the domain role. So let's save that, and we'll allow that one to update. And we're going to come into this one, and again, because they're routing between each other, we're going to put in the same address. Okay, so we'll just allow those to update, and these should come back as a success in a moment. Okay, so while we're waiting for this, there's the first one, the second one's just updated. While we're waiting for this, obviously building our virtual machines is going to be another area of management. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new resource group. So if you cast your mind back to last week, I'm going to hold down G and R. Okay. And from there, I'm going to go ahead and create a new resource group. I'm going to call this resource group name VMs. Okay, so I'm going to create one called VMs, and we'll pin that to the dashboard. So let's go ahead and create that resource group, and we can see that's now created, but nothing is in there. Okay, so let's just go ahead and make that a little smaller. So let's make that a 2x1, and we're done. Okay, so let's now go ahead and build our first virtual machine. So again, I'm going to click onto my resource group, and then from there I'm going to go ahead and click add, and I'm going to look for a Windows server, and I'm going to pick the Windows Server 2012 R2 data center. Okay, so we're going to choose this top one, Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center. And what this is going to do is it's going to open up a new blade and ask us to complete some wizards. So at the heart of the Microsoft Cloud OS vision, Windows Server 2012 R2 brings Microsoft experience delivering global scale cloud services into your infrastructure. It offers enterprise class performance, flexibility for your applications, and excellent economics for your data center and hybrid cloud environment. This image includes Windows Server 2012 R2 update, and then there's the knowledge base article. So that's fine. So let's go ahead and select the deployment model, and I'm going to go ahead and choose Classic, and I'm going to hit Create. Okay, so as we move across, we can see that it wants to know our host name, our username, and our password. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call mine CMP DC. So it's our cloud and proud. So C and P DC. The username I'm just going to put in as student, and the password I'm going to put in as capital P A $W0 RD 123. Now I'm just going to check that, so I'm going to move over to here and click, and we can see that it's capital P A $W0 RD 123. From here we're going to move down to our pricing tier. So if I click on my pricing tier, it's going to open up a new blade, and it's going to come up with some recommended options for us. But what we want to do is we want to view all. Okay, so I'm conscious of the fact that we're all using our MSDN licenses, and I want to keep costs to a minimum. And because we're just running a small demo environment, we really don't need large machines. So I'm going to come down, and we're going to look at the A series. Okay. Now there's two types of A series we can choose. We've got the standard and we've got basic, and it's important to note the difference between them. A basic won't allow auto scaling or load balancing, and you'll notice that the disks are a slightly smaller IOP. Okay, but that's fine for our demo environment. So I'm going to go ahead and choose an A2 basic. That's going to give me 2 cores, 3.5 gig of RAM. It's going to allow me to attach up to 4 additional data disks, and each of those data disks can be up to 300 IOPS. So that's fine. I'm going to select this guy. I'm going to hit select and wait for that to update. So we can now see that our pricing tier is a basic A2. Now if I come down to our optional configuration, we've got a whole bunch of settings that we need to configure. So we're going to start from the top and we're going to work our way down. So under OS settings, Okay, from here, it's going to want to know, do we want automatic updates turned on or turned off? Now, I'm going to leave my automatic updates turned on. I'm going to come down to my time zone and I'm going to select Central US. Okay, so I'm going to choose -6 Central America. And we can see that if I come down into my domain join, I can choose to join this machine into a domain. Now at the moment we don't have a domain, but future virtual machines that we can create, we're going to populate these boxes and get them to join our newly created domain. So let's come out of here, let's hit OK, and let's come down to the next one. So the next one we've got is an availability set. Okay, now when we build things in the cloud, we still follow the same rules as what we've had when we build stuff on-prem. And by that I mean we should always have at least two. Two will give us redundancy and a little bit of fault tolerance. Now what an availability set does for us is it puts those machines into separate update and fault domains. If we come down to network, from here what we're going to do is we are going to choose how we want to address this machine and what virtual network we want to put it on. Now we can see that it started to create, or suggesting that it creates its own virtual network, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the virtual network and we're going to choose to use an existing virtual network that we created in the last session. So we want this virtual machine to go into our production network. So when I click production, you'll notice that it's now changed focus onto the production subnet that we defined last week. If we come down to our domain name, now our domain name is how our machines are going to be identified on the internet. Okay, so let's break off for a moment and take a look at what this means. Okay guys, so what do we mean by the domain name? So look, we're creating these resources. We're creating a virtual machine here, we're creating some member servers here, and we said that these will go in to a cloud service. Now if we look at the old portal, it's called a cloud service. In the new portal, it's called a domain name, but it's effectively this name here. Okay, so it's this address here, and the telltale sign is if it ends in cloudapp.net. What it means is if I've got an external resource, okay, that wants to connect up via the internet, it can do this by connecting up via the name, okay, or we can use the public IPv4 address, in other terms the VIP, the virtual IP. Okay, so just like any resource on the internet, we can connect up using a DNS name, or we can use an IPv4 address. Okay, so let's go ahead and configure that. Okay, so let's go and configure it. So what do we want this to be? Let's click on our domain name. And from there, I'm going to choose Cloud and Proud prod. Okay, so C and P prod, and it's going to be cmp prod.cloudapp.net, and you see that we got a little green tick in there. Okay, so let's go ahead and say OK. That's going to be our DNS name. This is going to allow external connectivity. So let's come down to IP addresses. So under IP addresses, we've got 3 to choose from. Now this is where we need to learn about a VIP, an IP, and a PIP. So once again, let's just take a moment, let's break off, let's understand what these are about, and then we'll come back and we will configure. Okay, so let's understand our addresses. And the first one that we want to start with is VIPs. Now a VIP is a virtual IP address that is assigned to a cloud service. Now this could even be an IaaS cloud or a PaaS cloud. The address is used by external clients to communicate with the cloud service and its VMs. Now it's important to note that all VMs within a single cloud will have the same VIP. So what do we mean by this? Let's go ahead and just draw this down. So we've got our cloud service. Okay, in our cloud service we're going to have our virtual machines. Okay, so we're going to have VM1, VM2 and VM3. As far as my external client is concerned, all of these will share the same name and the same IP address. So we are connecting up to a singular name or a singular IP address. So how do we differentiate them? Well, each of these machines will have different endpoints. Okay, and what we do is when we construct our connectivity, we will use the VIP plus the endpoint to allow us to connect up to the correct machine. Okay, so it's important to note that it's assigned to a cloud or domain name in the new portal. It's shared by all resources and differentiated by endpoints. Now it's dynamic by default. It can be set static at creation via PowerShell or in the new portal, but we need to make that decision during creation. PIPs. Now a PIP is used by VMs to communicate within the VNet. So when we're connected to a VPN, to a VNet via a VPN, our on-premise clients will be able to communicate by using PIPs. Okay, so there's a couple of important points to remember. Now this is obtained from the Azure DHCP. It's configurable from our VNet. So if you cast your mind back to last week when we went in, we said that our production VNet was on the 10 range. We said that our development VNet was on the 20 range. What it means is the virtual machines that are created within that VNet will get the subsequent IP address ranges. It can be set dynamic or static via the VM portal, but never set a static IP address directly on a VM in itself. So, like we would have done in the past, never go into the network stack and set a static IP address. You always do this via a DHCP reservation in the Azure portal. The final address that we want to talk about is an IP. Now, an IP is an instance level IP address. Let's think about why we might need this. So in some cases, we may want to enable external clients the ability to communicate directly with specific virtual machines hosted inside a cloud service through a direct IP address without specifying an endpoint port number. Now, if we think of an example of this, if we're using FTP in passive mode, the client negotiates the port number to use for transferring files. In such cases, assigning an instance level IP address to the VM would be the preferred choice. Okay, so now we know what our IP addresses are. Let's go back into our portal and let's configure this for our virtual machine. And we're back. So let's have a look. So we can see that we've got our virtual IP address. Now again, the virtual IP address is going to be assigned to our cloud or our domain name. Okay, so here's the name, here is the associated public IPv4 address. Now I've got two options. Do I want to make it dynamic? Do I want to make it reserved? If I make it reserved, it's always going to have the same public address. If I make it dynamic, it will have that address as long as resources are running inside it. Okay, so if I've got a whole bunch of virtual machines, I shut those virtual machines down, they're going to deallocate and this will lose its IP address. If you want to make sure that it's always got the same, you hit reserved. We're going to leave ours at dynamic. Now at this point in time, we're not going to worry about an IP. Okay, but we will come back to this when we build our member servers. So let's come down to a private IP address. Now again, the private IP address is the address that is defined from the VNet. And we can see that it can be either dynamic or static. Now just to reiterate what we said before, you never go into the network properties of an Azure Virtual Machine and set the address. We always set it here as a DHCP reservation. Now because this is going to be a domain controller, we want to give it a static IP address. So I'm going to go ahead and say static, and I'm going to give it the IP address of 192.168.10.10. Okay, if you cast your mind back, that was the address that we gave to our DNS servers this morning. So let's say OK, and we can see that our IP address is configured. Let's say OK, and we go back into this blade. So we've now done our OS settings, our availability set, and our network. We now come down to our storage account. So let's click on our storage account. Now the storage account is going to be the container in which the VHDs and the configuration files are stored. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new storage account. Okay, if I come down into my storage account, so I'm going to call this Cloud and Proud VM Disk. Okay, we can see we've got a little green tick here. But now what we need to do is we need to define our pricing tier. So let's just have a quick look at what we have here. Okay, so if we view all, we can see that we've got a number of pricing tiers. We've got locally redundant, which is going to give us 3 local replicas in our data center. Okay, it's going to support block blobs and page blobs. So just to make you all aware, a blob is a binary large object. Now a page blob is where our virtual machines are going to be stored. A block blob may be where we put our data files, our images, our documents and stuff like that. We can also support tables, queues and files. And with locally redundant storage, we've got 500 IOPS per disk with a 99.9% SLA, and that will cost us £1.47 per 100 gigabytes per month. Now if we're worried about redundancy, and remember this gives us 3 local copies, we can choose a geo-redundant version. Now the geo-redundant version will give us the 3 local replicas, but also 3 replicas in a remote data center. Okay. We also have read access geo-redundant, and finally we have our premium storage options. So you'll see that it jumps from 500 IOPS up to 5,000 IOPS. I'm going to choose locally redundant, so I'm going to choose this and hit select and hit OK. Now as we come down, we've got our diagnostics. If we click on diagnostics, we can choose whether or not we want those to be enabled. Okay, so turning off diagnostics will disable monitoring charts and alerts for your results. So let's go ahead and turn that on. Now as we turn that on, it's going to want to know where we're going to store those logs. And I'm going to choose the disk that we just created, so our Cloud and Proud VM disk. Let's say OK, and come down to our endpoints. So again, remember our endpoints. Our endpoints work in conjunction with our VIP to differentiate the resources within our cloud service. Okay, so because this is the first machine, it's going to use the correct ports. Okay, so for remote desktop it's going to be 3389, and for Windows Remote Management 5986. But subsequent machines that we create within this cloud service will start randomizing the ports that they get. Let's say OK, and let's come down to our extensions. Now our extensions are our VM extensions. You can see by default this VM image installs the following extensions. So BG Info, which was the old sysinternals tool. Okay, so this is going to give us our desktop wallpaper that tells us how much memory we've got and how much disk space we've got, etc. If I click on add extensions, We can go in and you can see there's a whole bunch of extensions that we can choose, be that for our virus protection, be this for our monitoring or management using things like Puppet or Chef. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the Microsoft anti-malware. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that in and just hit create. Okay, and again I can choose whether I want to exclude any files. Do I want to enable real-time protection? Do I want to enable a scheduled scan and the type of scan that I want? I'm just going to accept the defaults, and we're going to bring that back in. So we can see that we've now got Microsoft anti-malware configured. So let's go ahead and say OK, and come down to our performance monitoring. So with our performance monitoring, we can choose whether or not we want to enable application insights or create a new relic. Okay, now I'm going to leave this and just come down to our image version. Okay, so again, Microsoft will release a number of images for their virtual machines, and we have the option for choosing the last couple of iterations. I'm going to leave mine at November 2015, that's fine, and then from there I'm going to say OK. So that's now done with our optional configuration. We're just going to make sure that our resource group is our VMs. We can see that our subscription is right and our location is right. So for now I'm going to hit create, and that should take about 5 to 10 minutes to build. So what we'll do is we'll pause the video and we'll come back in 10 minutes when we're ready to proceed. Okay, and we're back. So we can see that our virtual machine has now been built. We can see that it's got a VIP address, so this is our public address of 23.99.200.19. Okay, so if we look at this top blade here, this is our essential blade. It can show us what resource group we're in, the status of the machine, the location of the machine, subscription information, the DNS name. So this is the DNS name of our cloud service, so cloudandproudprod.cloudapp.net. We can see the OS that it's running and the size. If we come over to all settings, okay, we can come down and we can see our audit logs, our boot diagnostics, we can check the health, reset our password, we can troubleshoot, and we can generate a new support request if need be. From here we can come down and we can see we've got the properties of our virtual machine. Okay, so from here we can see that we've got our private IP address of 192.168.10.10, and that was the static address that we created. Again, we can see we've got our VIP address and the computer name that we generated, so Cloud and Proud domain controller. We can see information about our disks. So we can see that we've got our OS disk and we can attach existing or new disks. And remember, we can attach up to 4 with this build. We come down to our IP addresses. We can see that we've got our VIP, which is dynamic, and notice that we can't change that. We said that we could only change that during creation. Okay. We can see that we can add an IP if need be, and we can change the status of our pip. We come down to our endpoints, we can see that we've got our remote desktop and our Windows remote management, and we said because this is the first machine, they're going to be the correct ports, but when we build additional machines we should see that this will have a dynamic range in them. We can build load balance sets, availability sets, we can see the extensions. So we can see we've got BG info, we can see we've got our anti-malware, and we've got some diagnostic information in there. We can see the size of our machine, and we can choose to scale up and down if need be. So we just wait for that tier to load, so we can choose to scale up and down if we need to. We can set some monitoring, so alert rules and diagnostics, and we can set up our role-based access control and who's got access into this resource. So what I want to do now is I just want to look at ways that we can connect into this. Okay, and we're going to be able to do this 2 ways. We're going to be able to connect up using either the VIP, or we're going to be able to connect up using the pip. Now the reason we'll be able to connect up using the pip is because we've got our VPN connected. So let's test this. Let's go into a new remote desktop connection. And let's try and connect up first off using the VIP. So 23.99.200.19. Okay, now because this is the first machine, we know it's going to be on port 3389, so we don't have to specify it. But if I hit connect, what we'll see is it's going to allow us to connect up into this virtual machine. Okay, so we can connect up using the VIP. But because we're also connected using the VPN, we should also be able to connect up using 192.168.10.10. If we hit connect, we can see that's the case too. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to authenticate into this machine. Just move that to one side and say yes, and we're just going to bring up this VM. Okay, now obviously this will be a little slow because it's not a particularly big iteration of the machine that we've created, but that will spring to life in a moment or two. And what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to promote this machine to a domain controller. So do you want to find PCs, devices and content on this network automatically? So let's just say yes, and we'll wait for Server Manager to wake up. We can see we've got our BG info in the background. Okay, so this is now springing into life. If I just minimize this for the moment, I'm just going to go into PowerShell, and what I want to do is I just want to go ahead and do an IP config, because I just want to have a look at some of the settings that have come down from this Azure DHCP. Okay, so if we come down, we can see that, look, we've got the lease obtained from Monday, January the 11th, 2016, and that's valid until Thursday, February the 17th, 2151. So we'll see that when it comes to Azure DHCP, it's a massive scope. It's not the same as the lease of a standard DHCP, which for a wired connection would be 8 days. We can see that we've got our default gateway. We can see that we've got our DHCP server, and this is the Azure DHCP server. But more importantly, we can see that we've got this DNS server that we set earlier. So this was the scope option that we set at the beginning of today's session. Okay. We can see that our IP address is 192.168.10.10. Okay, now although that is set as dynamic to the virtual machine, it's set as a reservation within the Azure DHCP. So let's come out of here, let's go back into our server manager. And again, incidentally, the reason this would be red is because the machine is just started. The services have probably have a delayed start, so eventually this will all go green. But for now, we want to go ahead and add some roles and features. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to navigate through the Add Roles and Features wizard because we want to make this both a DNS server and a domain controller. So I'm going to say next, and I want to add DNS. So okay, so when I click on DNS, it's going to come up with, do we want to add the features? And I'm going to say yes, and we should get a warning. Now the reason we're getting a warning is this machine believes it's got a dynamic IP address, which in fairness it has. But because it's always going to get the same one, we're just going to ignore that error. Okay, so we're going to say continue, because in this instance we know better than the machine. So we're going to leave on DNS server, and we're going to click on domain services. We're going to add the features, and we're going to say next, 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 and install. So it's a simple whack wizard at this point. Okay, so we'll allow this to do the installation, and then what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll finish the configuration. Okay, so that's now done. We can see that the features have been installed. So what we're now going to do is we're going to come down and click to promote this server to a domain controller. Okay, so let's click on the link. And what we want to do is we want to add a new forest. Okay, so our forest name is, I'm going to call mine Cloud and Proud .local. Okay, so Cloud and Proud .local. Let's say next. I want to leave the forest and domain functional levels to Windows Server 2012 R2. It's going to be the DNS server and also the global catalog. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and put in our directory service restore mode password, and I'm going to put in capital P A $W0 RD 123 and capital P A $W0 RD 123. So from here I'm going to say next and next, and we're just going to let it work out its NetBIOS name. Okay, so Cloud and Proud. We'll say next. We're going to leave the default paths. Okay, so this is going to specify where our database and log files go. So we can see that it's going into C Windows NTDS and our sysfile folder, which is obviously looking after our policies and startup scripts. So let's go next. Under review options, we're fine. We can view the script if need be, if we were installing this onto a server core machine. Let's say next. We'll allow it to do the prerequisite check, and once it's done this, we can then go ahead and hit install. Okay, so that's now done. Let's go ahead and hit install. And then what will happen is this machine will then reboot, and we'll be able to log into our newly created domain. Okay guys, so our domain controller is just rebooting. While that is rebooting, I've just gone in and cleaned up or tightened security of my virtual machine. Now obviously in this video I'm telling you how I can connect into this using my VIP. We spoke about the endpoints, we know the username that I've picked and the password that I've used. So what I've done is I've gone into my all settings, and now we're comfortable with what endpoints are. I've actually removed the endpoints, so the only way that I can connect into these virtual machines are via the VPN that I've created, which has made the whole thing more secure. Okay, so let's just minimize that. While we're here, let's just go in and customize. Let's make that a smaller tile and drag that into the right place and hit done. With that done, let's come down and go back into our virtual machine, which we can now see is up and running. If we look at our server manager, we can see that we've got our domain services and DNS up and running. So what I want to do is I want to go over to tools. I want to come down into Active Directory users and computers, and I can see that I have my AD in cloudandproud.local. Okay, and I want to bring up my DNS, and in my DNS I want to expand and see under my forward lookup zones I've got cloudandproud.local and the virtual machines that are in there. Okay, so our domain controller is up and running. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new organizational unit for some users. So I'm going to come down to organizational unit, and I'm just going to call this Azure. And in here I just want to go ahead and create a couple of new user accounts. So I'm going to create one, and I'm going to choose a couple of wrestlers. My son is obsessed with the WWE, so let's pick a couple of wrestlers for him. So we're going to have John Cena, and we'll just go ahead and give him a password. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and create one more, so a new user. Let's go ahead and have, so Randy Orton. And we'll give Randy Orton a password. And the last thing that I want to do is I just want to go ahead and create one more user account, and I'm going to call this local AD. Okay, so I'm going to have a local AD with a user logon name as local AD. Again, I'm going to put in a password. And what I want to do with local AD is I actually want to make him a member of Enterprise Admins. Now the reason I'm doing this is when we look at AD Connect in a future session. Okay, so we've now created some user accounts in our Azure AD, in our Active Directory, and we've set up our DNS. Okay, so this now puts us in good stead for creating our additional machines. So let's do that. Let's now go ahead and create a member server. So to do this, I'm going to click on my VMs resource group. We can see that now when I click on my VM resource group, I've got my cloud, I've got my virtual machine, and we can see that I've got my disk in there. We're going to go ahead and add a new virtual machine. So I'm going to choose add. I'm going to choose again Windows Server 2012, and we're going to choose this Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center. Just like before, we'll select the top option. I'm going to choose Classic and Create. Okay, and I'm only using Classic because I want to show you all of these options. In future sessions, we'll go ahead and we'll use the Resource Manager to create some. So on this one, I'm going to create Cloud and Proud MS1 for Member Server 1. Again, the username is going to be student. The password is going to be $W0RD123. Okay, for the pricing tier, now this time I'm going to choose a standard, an A series, but I want it to be standard and not basic because I want to set this one up with auto scaling and some load balancing. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to choose, let's choose an A2 standard. So 2 cores, 3.5 gig of RAM, up to 4 data disks, each up to 500 IOPS, which is 200 IOPS faster per disk than the basic. But this one also gives us load balancing and auto scaling. So we're going to select this guy and wait for that to update. Now under optional configuration, we're going to go into our OS settings. We want automatic updates on. For our time zone, we'll go into select Central America UTC -6, but this time we want to join a domain. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to select this cloudandproud.local. Okay, and because it's going to pick up an IP address from the Azure DHCP, it will be fine. So our domain is going to be cloudandproud.local. Our username is going to be cloudandproud/student. And our password, let's go ahead and type in our password. Okay. And say OK. So now what's going to happen is this virtual machine create is going to automatically join that domain. So let's say OK. And come down to availability sets. Now, we're going to use an availability set this time. I'm going to create multiple machines and I'm going to make sure that they go into separate update and fault domains. Now what that means is if one rack in the Microsoft data center fails, it won't affect the other machines. But Microsoft, like any other company, have to perform management on their physical hardware on their tin. By putting them into separate update domains, what it means is as they power cycle one set of racks, it won't affect the additional machines because they'll be in subsequent racks. So let's go ahead and create a new availability set. Let's call this availability set Cloud and Proud MBR SVRS. So the Cloud and Proud member servers. Let's say OK. And come across to our network. So for our network, again, we can see that by default it's trying to put it into its own. So we want to change this. We want to click on here and we want to select our production. So we want to select our Cloud and Proud production, and we'll notice that it changes our subnet. Okay, so it's changed our subnet. Okay, we're going to choose our existing cloud service. Okay, so we don't want it to create a new one, we want to select our existing cloud service, which again means it will then share the same VIP. And we can see this if we come down to our IP addresses. So if I click on IP addresses, you'll notice that the VIP is grayed out, it's already been created. As we come down, we're going to leave the IP at this point, but our PIP we're going to make as DHCP. So let's go ahead and say OK. And go ahead and say OK. And that's now configured. If we come down to our storage account, we're going to use the existing Cloud and Proud VM disk. Diagnostics, we're going to turn on diagnostics for this machine, again using the Cloud and Proud VM disk. Our endpoints, we can see that we've got multiple endpoints in there, and again at this point it's grayed out. Okay, so let's say OK. Let's go down to extensions, and like before, what we want to do is we want to add extensions for the Microsoft anti-malware. So let's click on Microsoft anti-malware, let's click create. We're going to go ahead and accept the defaults. And hit OK. Again, we're fine with performance monitoring and image version, so we're going to say OK. We can see that our resource group is fine, our subscription is fine, and our location is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and build that machine. Okay, now again, that should take between 5 and 10 minutes to build, so we'll pause the video and come back. And we're back. We can see that our Cloud and Proud member server 1 is now built. If we come down again, just like before, we've got our essential settings. If we come down into properties, we can see our private IP address that's been assigned to this machine. Okay, so let's just quickly come down and take a look at the main controller. we can see in DNS that our Cloud and Proud member server has automatically been added. And if we come into computers, we can see that we've got Cloud and Proud member server 1, which has joined our domain. So that machine is now already in the domain and there's no further action needed from us. What I do want to do, however, though, is clean up our endpoints. So again, if I come down into my virtual machine, if I come into endpoints, what we want to do is we want to have a look at what the endpoints are. And you can see that, look, they've randomized the ports. Okay, so we can see that these ports have been randomized. I don't need these because I'm connecting up over a VPN. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, and under my endpoints I'm just going to go ahead and delete. So we want to delete the remote desktop and the WinRM, and that will take a few minutes. So let's go ahead and delete those, pause the video, and we'll come back when they're cleaned up. Okay guys, so we can see that my endpoints have cleaned up, which has made my access to the virtual machine more secure. Okay, so let's just minimize all this. Again, let's clean this up. So we just put that into the right location. And then into my remote desktop, I'm going to open up a new connection to 192.168.10.4. And we'll connect in as my username and password. And we're going to go ahead and connect into that virtual machine. Brilliant. So we'll let that virtual machine initialize. While that's happening, let's just go ahead and build our second member server. So again, hopefully you should be familiar with this process now, but let's just go through it again. Let's click on our resource group. From here, if we look at our blade, we should now see that we've got one cloud, one disk, but two virtual machines, because they're sharing the same cloud, they're sharing the same storage account. So let's just go in and go add. Again, we're going to search for a Windows Server 2012 R2 data center. We're going to switch to Classic and create. We're going to call this one the Cloud and Proud Member Server 2. Username is going to be student. Type in our password. Our pricing tier, we need to make sure that we select the same pricing tier for our availability set. So let's go view all. And we're going to select the A2 standard. So A2 standard and select. And from here, let's just configure our optional configuration. So again, very similar to before. In our OS settings, we're going to say automatic updates on. We're going to point to UTC-6 Central America. And we're going to configure our domain join. So our domain is going to be cloud and proud.local. Our username is going to be cloud and proud student, and our password PA$W0RD123. So it's okay. And it's okay. Now, what's really important this time is that we join it to an existing availability set. So if I click on my availability set, what I'm then going to do is I'm going to come across and select my Cloud and Proud member servers. And what's interesting is as I select this availability set and come down to network, you'll notice that it's put it into the right network, the right subnet, and the right domain name. So there's very little for us to configure here. We're just going to say OK. That's now configured. The storage account is fine. The diagnostics, let's just go ahead and turn on diagnostics. Okay, we know about our endpoints now, so let's come down to extensions. We're going to add Microsoft anti-malware, and again we're just going to accept the defaults. So we're going to say OK. And OK. And then from here we're fine with everything else. The resource group is fine, subscription location's fine, so let's go ahead and create this virtual machine. We'll come back in 10 minutes when this one is created. And we're back, so we can see that our second member server has now been created. And if we come back into our domain controller, we can see that it's been added into DNS. And if we come up into computers, we can see that it's now joined the domain. Okay, so we're all good. So let's go ahead and connect up into this. So if we open up a new remote desktop connection, this time we want to connect up to 192.168.10.5. That's connected, and we want to connect up as Cloud and Proud student, and we'll enter our credentials. Okay, so we'll just connect into this machine. Okay, and we'll just let it initialize in the background. Okay, so we now have our three virtual machines. We've got our domain controller, we've got our 192.168.10.4 or member server 1, and we've got member server 2, which is just building in the background. Okay, so what I want to do now is I just want to switch over to our older portal just to show you the availability sets. Okay, so if I just move across to my older portal, okay, and we're going to come back into our main screen. Now, if you haven't already got this open, you get to this portal by going to manage.windowsazure.com. Okay, and from here we can see everything that we've built. Now, one of the things that I want to look at is this Cloud and Proud. Okay, now if I click on Cloud and Proud, and we move over to instances, we can see that Cloud and Proud DC is in update domain 0, fault domain 0. Okay, but we've put Cloud and Proud member server 1 and member server 2 together into the same availability set. So Cloud and Proud member server 1 is in update domain 0, fault domain 0, but Cloud and Proud member server 2 has gone into update domain 1, fault domain 1. Now bear in mind, like we said, Microsoft, like any other company, has to perform patch management on their physical servers. Okay, by putting them into separate update domains, it means that Microsoft won't power cycle them at the same time. We can have up to 5 update domains, so 0 to 4. We can have up to 2 fault domains, 0 to 1. Okay, so guys, let's just jump back into our new portal. Now, I appreciate that this is a long session and we've done an awful lot, but there's just a couple more cool things that I want to show you before we wrap up today's episode. So let's just clean this up. So let's go customize 1 by 1 and just put him in the right location. And we hit done. Now, like I say, a couple of things that I want to show you. I want to show you auto scaling, but before we do that, I figured what we could look at is load balancing. And what we're going to do is we're just going to build a web page on member server 1 and member server 2, and then we'll set up some load balancing between them. So if we jump into member server 1, and we're in Server Manager, just want to go ahead and add roles and features. Now what we're going to do is we're going to install the web service. We're not going to do anything clever with it, we're just going to deface the front page, but it's just going to show us load balancing and how we can connect up. So let's go next, and next, and next. And we want to come down under roles, and I'm just going to select web server IaaS. So I'm going to add the features, and then next, 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 and install. So nothing particularly difficult there, it's just a simple whack whack wizard, and we'll let that install. Now while that's installing, I want to go ahead and do exactly the same for that second member server. Okay, so I'm going to connect into the second member server. I'm going to add roles and features. From here we're going to go through, and under server roles we're going to come down just like before and select our web server. We're going to add the features, and then next, 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 and install. So a simple whack whack wizard. Okay, now once these two machines have installed the web service, we're just going to go ahead and deface the default web graphic. Okay, so let's minimize this and head back into our first machine and see how we're doing. So we can see that that's installation started, and that's just chugging along in the background. Okay, and it's finished. So let's go ahead and close that down and minimize this, and let's just go ahead and deface that graphic. So if we go into our C drive, from here let's go into our inetpub folder and our www root, and in there you can see that we've got a PNG file. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose to edit this, and it should open up in Paint. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw, let's choose my brush, a one on there. Okay, and we'll go ahead and we'll save that graphic. So we'll save that and close that one down. And then we're going to jump into our second machine. We can see it's completed. And just like before, let's go into our C drive, let's go into our inetpub, www root, and we're going to edit that PNG image. We're going to select a pencil, we're going to select a thick brush, and we're just going to draw a 2 on that guy. From there, let's go File, Save, and we can close that down. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's minimize this and let's open up an internet tab, and from here if we go HTTP, we should be able to connect up into 192.168.10.4 and see the one web page, and if we move across to 10.5 we should see the 2 web page. Brilliant. Okay, so now moving forward, what are we going to do with this? Well, we're going to put these into a load balance set. So I'm going to come back into my Cloud and Proud member server 1, and under my all settings I'm going to come down to load balance sets. Okay, so load balance sets. And what I want to do is I want to come in and I want to create a new load balance set. So I'm going to click on Join. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to configure a load balance set. So we're going to configure the required settings. Okay, we're going to create a load balance set, which I'm going to call this MS web, so my member server webs. My public port is going to be port 80. Okay, my pro port is going to be 80, and then I'm just going to leave the access rules and the intervals and number of retries. So I'm going to leave that as is. Okay, so I've got my MS web. Okay, we'll let that come back. That's now done. It's going to be a public one, so MS web port 80. Let's hit OK, and that's going to join the load balance set. Now again, what that's going to give us is the public VIP address, but it's then going to differentiate between member server 1 and member server 2 once we've configured this second machine. So we're just going to wait for this to update, and we can see that it's joining the machine to the load balance set. And once that's done, we're going to go ahead and do that to the second machine. Okay, and that's now done, and we can see that MS Web is there. So brilliant. Let's come back. Let's close down these blades. And let's bring up our second member server. Let's come down into load balance sets. And we're going to get this guy to join the MS Web. Okay, so we're going to go in, we're going to choose load balance set. We're going to use an existing load balance set of MS Web. Let's wait for that to update. No problem with the tile. Okay, but we can see that it's actually updated, so let's go ahead and OK that. Okay, so it's picked in the MS Web, picked in the private port, we know it's public. Let's OK that and get that to join. So we'll just see if that's joined. So a little bit of a wobble with the portal, but it appears to be working fine. So we're just going to let this update, and we should see this populate here in a minute or two. And here we go, guys. Look, you can see that MS Web is now there. Okay, so we now have these two machines in a load balance set. And what they're going to do is, because we've configured this on the public endpoint, if I now move into here and under HTTP paste in my VIP and press enter, what you'll see is we'll be able to flick between the two machines. Okay, and it might take a moment or two, but eventually what will happen is if we continue to refresh, it moves over to the second machine. Okay, so it just took a moment to update, but we're now load balancing between member server 1 and member server 2. So let's close that down. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to look at in this session is we're going to set up auto scaling. Now bear in mind that in our demo setup, we're not really doing this production ready. We should always have at least two machines. So I should have at least two domain controllers. I've got my two member servers, but what I want to do is I want to dynamically bring one up and shut one down as performance dictates. So to do this, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go back to the original portal, and we're going to come across to scale. Now when I click on scale, we can see that I've got my domain controller. Now I can't set this up for auto scaling. Okay, the reason I can't set this up for auto scaling is A, it's a basic instance, and B, there's only one instance of it. But the Cloud and Proud member servers, we can see that auto scaling is currently off, although it's recommended that we turn it on. So let's drill down and see what we can do. So under the Cloud and Proud member servers, we can see that I can set up auto scaling for a scheduled time. Okay, so if my company operates 24/7, but the majority of my users are there 9 till 5, I can shut down machines for non-peak hours by setting up a schedule. I can also do this based on queue, but what we're going to choose is CPU. So I'm going to come down to CPU, I'm going to click on CPU, and I'm going to choose to have between 1 and 2 instances. And I want my target CPU, and again I can adjust these sliders, to increase as it goes over 80%, but then decrease as it falls below 60. I can choose to scale up by 1 instance at a time, and I can choose how long I wait before it adds yet another instance. Okay, so I might choose to scale up every 10 minutes, okay, 15, 20, 30 or so on. I'm going to choose to scale up after 5 minutes. Actually, let's choose 10. And I'm going to choose to scale down 1 instance at a time after 5 minutes. Okay, so looking at this, we're going to scale up 1 machine at a time. I'm going to scale up 1 at a time after 10 minutes of processor over 80%. I'm going to scale down after 5 minutes of the processor falling below 60%. So let's go ahead and save this. And one of the things that I can do is once that's saved, I can set up some notifications of this. Okay, so we can see that that's complete. If I now come back to monitor, what I can do is I can get some notifications on this. So on my monitoring tab, what I want to do is I want to look at the CPU percentage for my Cloud and Proud member server 1. So I'm going to click into here, and what I want to do is I want to add a rule. And if we look at adding a rule, I'm going to call this CPU alert. Okay, and what I want to do is if I go next, I want to know when the CPU is greater than 80% over an average of 5 minutes. What I want it to do is I want it to send an email to the service administrator and co-administrator. I'm going to choose to enable this rule and OK. So if you think about what we've just done, it should scale down one of my virtual machines, but if I get into a period of peak CPU access, after 5 minutes Azure should email me, and after 10 minutes it should scale up another instance of those virtual machines. Let's go back into our all objects, and we'll wait 5 minutes, and what we should see is that Cloud and Proud member server 2 should be in a stop state. So let's pause the video, we'll come back in 5 minutes and we'll see if that's occurred. And we're back, and we'll notice that look, Cloud and Proud member server 2 is now in a stop state. The reason it's in a stop state is there's no particular significant load on the CPU of member server 1, so Azure has decided that it can shut this machine down and half our costs. Now what we should know is that Cloud Service now has an exclamation mark in there, and I cast your mind back to what we talked about earlier. Because when we built the cloud service we used a dynamic VIP, what this is warning us is that if we lose member server 1 and DC, this will release its VIP address. If we go into the Cloud and Proud cloud service, if we click on our scale, it should tell us that auto scale has saved us 50% of our costs. So Azure is aware that we should only be using these machines if we need them, and it's significantly saving us money by shutting down unused compute resources. Okay, so the very last thing that we're going to look at in this session, because I forgot to mention it before, is the IP. So at this point we know about our virtual IP, we know about our private IP, but we said that we would take a look at the VIP too. Now if you remember, the VIP was the IP address which was assigned not to the cloud but to the virtual machine itself. So if I come across to my IP addresses, if I then come into instance level IP address and turn it on, okay, and hit save, what will happen is it will take a minute or two to update that virtual machine, but it will give it a public IP address for direct access. So we don't have to worry about endpoints, and we don't have to worry about sharing that IP address. The way I think about this is it effectively puts that machine into a demilitarized zone and allows public access to it. So we'll give it a minute and we'll go in and we'll test. And we're back. And look guys, we can see that we now have an instance level IP address. We have a public IPv4 address. And if we go ahead and open up HTTP and paste that in, we can connect directly into it too. Now obviously I can do everything with this. I can RDP into it, I can connect up into remote services. Like I said before, this effectively puts it into a demilitarized zone. Okay, so what I'm now going to do, now we've proven that it works, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and clean up this session. Okay guys, very long session today, but we've achieved awesome work. Let's have a recap of what we've done. Okay, so we built upon our production VNet. The first thing that we did is we went in and we configured our DNS settings. We then went in and created a new domain controller with a basic A-series virtual machine. Now we gave that a static IP address and then promoted that into a domain controller and a DNS server. Once we'd done that, we discussed our pips, vips and ips before going off and building our two member servers. Now with our member servers, we made the addresses dynamically allocated, but we configured them for high availability and demoed it with our websites, and then finally we configured auto scale so we could bring up and take down the machines as we needed. I want to thank you for your patience and your time and look forward to next week's session.